Ooh, baby, do you know what that's worth? Ooh, heaven is a copyright strike. What's up, boys? We got a minute. Share out the stream and click that like button if you so please. I'm back in town. We're going to be doing this every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Time. Unless, of course, something blows up at work, because I do have a day job right now. It is what it is. We'll see how that goes. Hello and welcome everybody to the Crypto Mining Show, your one-stop shop for all cryptocurrency news from the perspective of a cryptocurrency miner. I go by Blind Run on the internet and Matthew in real life, and today we are finally back with the Crypto Mining Show after an extended hiatus due to basically setting all of this up again. I know, how many times am I going to reset my office up? Hopefully this is the last time, at least for like a year or so. I do have plans in about a year or whatnot, somewhere around there, of once again moving again to another location. But this should be a lot more stable for me because I work from this location. I sleep at this location. It will make it a lot easier for me to make content. Things have been, quite crazy in my personal life. You guys can catch up on that later. Today, we're really going to talk about cryptocurrency because holy moly, there's a ton of stuff to catch up on. I mean, we had the KRC20 launch, which we were joking about in the chat before the stream. We have the Zealous fork to change the mining algorithm, which is a huge deal. Let me take a look here. We have things going on with Warthog. They basically had their blockchain stall yesterday. We have other updates from Warthog that are a bit more positive. Of course, we'll get into those a little bit later on. We have a lot of projects working on basically difficulty smoothing, and this has been because of the bouncing around of miners depending on profitability. Aelon has done this, Warthog has done this, Zealous has done this. A lot of different chains have been working on it. There have been some really good innovations surrounding difficulty adjustments, so that's something we're definitely going to be covering because it needs to be covered. We're also going to be talking about the new Bitmain and IceRiver miners for Aelon. Now, I haven't done an interview or covered Aelon in quite some time, but as you guys know, I covered Aelon way back before it was even a thing. We interviewed the developer, and as such, that's kind of what I do over here. We find these projects earlier and way before anybody else. It's really hard to keep up with all of the projects though, and so I am going to be covering it. You guys know I'm not a fan of ASICs, unfortunately, right? And that is just because of a lot of what we're seeing right now with Caspa, with Aelon, with Radiant, and so on and so forth. I think that personally, I think that there needs to be at least some sort of ASIC resistance, not necessarily to completely prevent ASICs all of the time, but at least early on in projects, I think it can help smooth over that transition. Otherwise, a lot of the end users kind of take the big impact from the whole mining perspective. We're also going to be talking about, let me look at this, some hardware updates on the RTX 5090. We have basically a delay in the release, at least that's the rumor, and we do have some power numbers or power requirements that got leaked from Seasonic, so we'll take a look at some of those things. And there were some performance targets leaked as well, showing pretty lackluster performance over today's 40 series, unfortunately. We also have new releases to talk about from BZ Miner, as well as a new release from SRB Miner and Rigel. A lot of these are going to be surrounding, of course, the updates to the Zealous V2, Zealhash or Zealous Hash V2. So that's really where that's coming from. And then we are going to address some end user concerns surrounding Meterbox. I know, look, it gets covered. A lot of people are behind it. It's not so much to like come down on a ton of people, but you guys should be aware of some of their return policies. And people in the community have brought this to my attention, and seeing that we've been seeing a big push of Meterbox from other cryptocurrency YouTubers, I feel like you're only going to get that real hard news from, well, this channel per usual. We'll see how many enemies I end up making these days. It is what it is. We're also going to be talking about Radiant, and that is because I did release, of course, a glyph, which is their token system on the Radiant blockchain. I'm super excited about it. That being said, there are still a lot of issues with Radiant, so we're going to be talking about and addressing the entity in the room. Of course, that is something that I think a lot of you all have been aware of. It'll be interesting to see where that heads to in the future, because I think really we're seeing a huge centralization of volume of these new layer 1 proof of work projects into large bags and large entities. And it really goes against the ethos of cryptocurrency, in my humble opinion. I'm not a big fan of it, but this does seem to be just being, capitalized on by people that have a lot of capital. I guess pun intended there. We're also going to be talking about the Mining Conference 2024 happening in September in Minnesota. I will be speaking out there about basically speculative mining. If you guys aren't aware, I cover a lot of speculative mining over on sonofatech.locals.com. And I'm going to be talking about how to find speculative mines. I'm going to be talking about how to capitalize on speculative mines and all of that over at the Mining Conference 2024 in Minnesota. I'm definitely looking forward to that. Scott is going to be putting on that one. And I believe we also have some other guests, including Mark from Coastal Crypto. So I'll have a good time chatting with him as well, hopefully. And then I'm going to cover, of course, the goat glyph that I created. The how-to for that is already out on the channel, so you can go check that out. We're also going to be talking about, well, obviously Cplex and the KRC20, which I already mentioned. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and run the ad for today. And thank you everybody for being here. Don't forget to hit that like, comment, and subscribe down below if you enjoyed this content. And let's get into it. Today's sponsor is Build a Mine Bootcamp. I met Scott at the Crypto Mining Conference in Round Rock, Texas, where he assisted in helping put together that conference and visited one of his ASIC repair courses as well. I say all this to let you guys know that I am confident in my experience with Scott that he is the man to put this type of thing together successfully. In the Build a Mine Bootcamp, Scott will teach you how to avoid costly mistakes in building out your first megawatt of Bitcoin miners. You'll get a detailed roadmap and extensive planning checklists. You'll learn how to find the ideal site and get the best electricity rates. By the end of the bootcamp, Scott says you'll leave with spreadsheets, a working budget, and a design plan that you can take to your investors, contractors, team members, or whoever else you are working with to build your mine. Scott's goal is to help you do all this and get your mine built in less than 90 days. So take 30 seconds, go to www.build-a-mine.com/sun. I will have the link in the description below as well as the pinned comment. Then once you're there, click the I want to attend button and you will quickly be on your way toward mining 1 Bitcoin per month. All right, and welcome back, everybody. Be sure to check that out if you're interested in Bitcoin mining. Of course, we cover GPU mining primarily over here on this channel, and we have a great update from Zealous, the blockchain that was really heavily focused on CPUs and then did have their GPUs on. They have a very interesting project as far as the way it balances the power or basically the efficiency between who's going to be, make more between CPUs and GPUs. That is getting iterated on over and over again. And here recently, of course, I'm sure you guys are aware, they did have their hard fork to update to Zealous Hash v2. Now, this was a hard fork that was on July 10th while I was out of town. And there are obviously some FAQs. If you want to check out the link down in the description, please do so. What we are really interested in is what's included in this network update and hard fork. We have increased extra data per transaction. The extra data limit per transaction has been expanded to 32 kilobytes, enhancing flexibility and accommodating more complex transactions while setting a 1 kilobyte limit per transfer to maintain efficiency. This will fix a known issue with pools and exchanges when they have high counts of transactions to handle. By implementing this fix, it will improve scalability and reduce chances of having an orphaned and canceled transaction. We talked about difficulty smoothing and adjustments that have been applied across multiple blockchains here in the recent past, and this is no different. In this hard fork, they did introduce a smoothing of the difficulty adjustment, and this feature aims to stabilize mining difficulty transitions, ensuring a more predictable and secure blockchain operation. As you guys know, some of the biggest issues in cryptocurrency, at least from the proof of work perspective that we saw over the past cycle, was projects having issues with difficulty adjustment, most famously Ergo. And this can be very damaging to not only the blockchain, but the miners as well as the users. As we saw with Ergo, we saw an almost entire chain halt as miners hopped onto Ergo post ETH merge and then hopped off when they found it wasn't profitable, basically driving up the difficulty so high that when the hash rate came off, nobody could find a block, which meant blocks not being solved, no transactions happening, and this caused a huge kerfuffle to the point to where I spent almost $3,000 in power pointing my farm at it just to help them get to the next block so that we could basically have their difficulty adjustment applied. So it's very important that this is essentially addressed ahead of time on pretty much all blockchains, because you never know what's going to happen in the future with especially a project that is primarily focused on GPU and CPU mining. And that is because GPU and CPUs are going to be the most versatile mining hardware, which means they can move between algorithms and so on. And this means that, well, the downside can be obviously a big influx of security, essentially, and a big offboarding of it. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people are pro ASICs. The problem there is ASIC still experiences the same problem, but as a miner, you don't have anything left over. Essentially, when you see the Kadena miners go unprofitable, the hash rate goes down and miners just turn off. It can be kind of still similar. So I think at the same time, even if you are an ASIC focused proof of work blockchain, you should work on difficulty smoothing for these certain circumstances that could arise based on basically market trends. And you aren't going to have a lot of control over those market trends, at least in any fair launch cryptocurrency. Of course, you do have a little bit more in ones that have basically any sort of pre-mines or basically master nodes, those sort of things where you see a lot more manipulation and artificial manipulation of the price of the currency as it relates to either Bitcoin or the US dollar. That's a whole other problem in and of itself. And I think that should be avoided as well. But, let's not harp on it too much. There are some bug fixes here as well. Several bugs identified in the previous versions have been resolved, improving overall stability and reliability. Amongst them, a fix is provided for the, quote, wrong difficulty net hash reported on the Explorer and various other mining stats reporting resources. This is the big one, though. A new algorithm. The introduction of a new algorithm in Zealous Hash v2 is expected to optimize mining performance, with projected performance gaps between CPUs and GPUs anticipated to fall within the 2 to 4x range. And you see what happens with Zealous on a block-to-block basis is that you do have, in some cases, the GPUs outperforming the CPUs, and then the CPUs outperforming the GPUs. This is why it was necessary for them to smooth over the difficulty transitions as well, because that was causing bigger swings on top of just the algorithm. And that is why we're seeing both of these changes get applied. It should smooth out the difference in essentially the performance gaps of CPUs and GPUs, and has been proven out to be at least functioning to a certain extent. It'll take a little bit of time, I think, to really fully analyze it, and I will be paying attention to it and giving updates as we move forward. Overall, Zealous has been one of the most interesting projects, I think, out right now as far as layer 1 proof of works, and it's actually even more impressive because it has become essentially the fastest network that's layer 1 proof of work at this time. It has achieved 12 blocks per second, surpassing, of course, the mainnet of Caspa, not to necessarily talk about what's been done on the, the test nets for Caspa, but it has achieved 12 blocks per second with an average, during this time with a 82 millisecond average block time, which is pretty fantastic. So at the end of the day, you can go check out the links down in the description below. Go check this out. It's really interesting. I'm definitely bullish on the Zealous side of things from a technical perspective. Let me know what you guys think. I know there has been, I think for the most part, a lot of praise surrounding Zealous, especially with the latest move. And I think that is reflected, of course, in the mining profitability calculators, as we've seen on hashrate.no. And I think that moving forward, it should be really interesting to have such a strong showing before we move into the next potential bull run. So definitely something I'm interested in. That being said, you guys know I don't really mind things that already have a price set to them. I mind things before then. I have my bag of Zealous, that'll stay there, and then we'll just move on from there, right? It's kind of the way it goes. Always looking for the next thing, right? That being said, we have some bad news on one of the most recent speculative mines that I took part in over on sonofatech.locals.com, and that is that the Warthog network experienced essentially a halt yesterday. And Polaire posted this over on the Discord. There's not a ton of details, unfortunately. He said, "Hello, everyone. As you may have noticed, the blockchain went down just over an hour ago. This is a mechanism designed to prevent the production of invalid blocks. We invite all miners and pool developers to update their nodes so that they can continue mining. We have discovered the bug, which has already been fixed. Why isn't the update mandatory for non-mining exchanges and users? The update only aims to remove invalid transactions before they are mined, so it doesn't directly affect exchanges," and so on. Pre-built binaries will be available soon, and the link is posted over in their Discord. Now, I do have the link up here. The full changelog is right here if you want to go over the technical details and figure out what was changed to basically prevent this from happening in the future. Warthog's a really interesting project from the very get-go. A big reason why I got behind it initially was because I did come into a lot of the BC250 mining boards, and essentially those ASRock mining units with 12 of them in there. And because they have a CPU and a GPU on board there, and because Warthog's mining algorithm requires a CPU and a GPU combo, it was kind of the perfect match. Now, obviously, you can get even better hash rates with more powerful equipment, but being able to deploy a bunch of them at the same time made it very, very advantageous for people to do. The downside, of course, to this on the BC250 side was that we had a lot of licensing, a lot of essentially licensing pricing issues with mining operating systems. We did see those get resolved between Hive OS as well as all of the other ones, kind of vying for your participation within their OS, MMPOS obviously being one, Simple Mining being one as well. I believe MMPOS really, from a price perspective on the BC250 sides, kind of took hold there. So I really like what Warthog has done from the very get-go as far as dissuading individuals from basically building up a huge farm onto the network. That was obviously, did see a workaround with the BC250s, but I think overall it is still the proper direction, because what we're seeing is more decentralization and, you know, less major miners on kind of taking a project kind of hostage with the amount of hash power they have. Now, there is some stuff going on within Warthog that's going to be really interesting, but it's important to note that all of the developers do this in their free time and do work as developers full time. So not only are they anonymous, but they are also very busy. So it is one of those things where I'm not necessarily sure how fast they will get up and running and if it will be in time for necessarily the next bull run or anything like that. But there are some really interesting ideas surrounding DeFi, decentralized finance, for those of you that aren't aware of that, and then MEV, which is used to be known as miner extractable value, but now because of the prominence of proof of stake has been renamed to maximal extracted value, and essentially the sandwiching that happens there. Now, what they've done is there has been a matching engine demo that has been released by Shifu, one of the main developers over for Warthog. And essentially what this is aiming to do is solve those problems. And it goes on to say, why do you need this? Decentralized finance is becoming a killer application of crypto and is only going to grow in importance. However, it suffers from fundamental problem. Transactions can be reordered within a block. Since there's no direct concept of time in a blockchain, but instead the blocks form the discrete time sequence of events, there is no notion of which order came before or after within a block. Block builders artificially specify an order in which DeFi orders are processed. This leads to the concept of maximal extractable value, which describes this property and the possibility to reorder, add, or omit specific orders such that an arbitrage-like opportunity is formed and exploited. The most notable incarnation of this practice is the dreaded sandwich, which describes carefully crafted front running and back running of a victim's order such that it is pushed to the order to the specified limit price. For example, it works by buying before you buy and selling after you buy, and this is done precisely as much as your order's limit price allows. So the struggle is real, and one method to avoid this problem is to be secretive with your order, but this does not always work well, nor is it practical. Therefore, we need to make DeFi great again and fight back. The solution to this problem is simple to formulate, but difficult to implement. We need to get rid of the ordering of transactions within a block. Each transaction shall be treated equally. Obviously, then front and back running is not possible anymore, and so won't be sandwiches. He goes on to say that he proposes a new matching engine that finds the same price for all buys and all sells for a market. This price is fairly determined by supply and demand and also by pool liquidity. The goal is to implement this matching engine in Warthog network at some later stage together with hard-coded DeFi capabilities. Now, I have some questions surrounding this, primarily due to the fact that we have seen this in play on VerisHash. Now, we know that on the CPU side of the Warthog mining algorithm, VerisHash is being utilized, so I wouldn't be surprised if some of this idea comes from VerisHash. Now, basically the auto leveling of these transaction fees in DeFi on VerisHash has been solved with something known as liquidity pools. While on the surface, this sounds great, where you basically force all token creators to create liquidity pools at the very onset of the minting of their tokens, it actually also creates a barrier to entry for individuals to create tokens, upwards of $10,000 per project just in liquidity fees. Now, this gives the token essentially some sort of innate value off of the kick with the beginning of that token, which could be considered a positive, but also prevents the individuals that want to participate in creating tokens and projects to be at a higher financial capital access level. And I think that these can be really interesting ways to solve it, and you could do some fundraising and that sort of thing. It is an interesting way to solve it. I am wondering if that is really where he's headed. It sounds kind of similar to that. Or if it's going to be like, well, once you have the liquidity pool, we'll average those out and so on. The thing that Varus coin was able to do with that as well was essentially create at the node level auto arbitraging, because essentially all of that is public knowledge, and the miner will take that arbitrage and even those out across liquidity pools. So that's an interesting concept on the Varus coin side of things. We'll see what Warthog ends up doing in the long term, and I'll see if that kind of relation is as similar as it sounds on the surface level, or if it will be quite a bit different from a technical perspective. If you already know, in the comment section or the live chat, definitely let me know. I'll be reviewing those later on. Now, we did talk about smoothing out of difficulty. One of the projects that had a very bad time with difficulty was Aelon. Now, Aelon was another project that I speculative mined back during the Thanksgiving period, I guess, of 2023, and it was extremely lucrative for quite some time. This is because no mining calculators were putting it out. So even post-launch on exchanges, it remained extremely profitable. And we're talking like $10 to $20 a day on an RTX 4090. You start to see, essentially all of your rental services go through the roof, whether it was Vast AI or Chlor AI. And that was all due to people basically hash rate arbitraging on Aelon. What this ended up creating, though, as these miners went in and capitalized on it and then sold that off to the market, was it created the price coming down and then miners dropping off because the rentals are easy to turn off. And then it created basically the same problem or a similar problem that we saw with Ergo, where the network slowed down, the difficulty wasn't readjusting, and it became very apparent that on the Aelon development team, there we go, needed to do something about it. Now, they have done this, and it has been pretty impressive. And here you can see when the network Aelon hash rate spikes, block time shortened to around 100 seconds. The DSA then smooths it back to the average of 256 seconds. Similarly, when the hash rate drops, block time spike. This happened in the past 24 hours, and the DSA will smooth it out. As the difficulty decreases, thanks to DSA, block times will quickly return to the average of 256 seconds. And this has ended up being implemented and functioning very well on the Aelon mining pool at maxpool.org. I want to say thanks and a huge shout out. That's a big 10 membership gift from Vinny. Put the goats in the chat from Vinny. Usually I don't interrupt the show, but that was big enough to say, hey man, thank you so much. And there you go. I'm going to throw some goats in there for that. So thank you, good sir. I appreciate it. The price of Aelon obviously has come down quite a bit. So you can go check out their current mining hash rate calculator. I believe if you wanted to do like its ET hash essentially. So if you had the 3070, it would be 3.69 able per day. That is really going to only come out to that 30 to 40 cents per day, depending on your power costs and so on. And this is really where we've been sitting, I think, on the GPU side of things, about 30 to 40 cents a day on a 3070 for so long. And this is really driving a lot of people out of mining with GPUs, and I completely understand why. I think it's very important to still stack up your hardware, put it in storage if you want, and turn off your power. That's personally what I have done at this specific time. And then, you know, wait for the markets to return to either mine again or sell that equipment off at a better price than you currently could sell it off for. It's kind of what I've been looking at. Now, what's been replacing a lot of the GPU mining has been all of the cryptocurrency influencers, miners, YouTubers, kind of moving over to ASICs. And this is a really interesting thing to consider, I think, overall, because at the base level, if we talk about application-specific integrated circuits and their effect on blockchains, they can both be extremely positive and extremely negative. We've seen positive results from, of course, Caspa. We've seen some very negative results as it relates to Radiant. Now, you could say that that's because Caspa is a better project and Radiant's not as good of a project. I'm not so sure that's necessarily perfectly clear right now. Especially considering that we have tokens working on Radiant and not working on Caspa. It would seem a little silly to say one's better than the other. They both do different things, right? And we even see Zealous right now having faster block times than Caspa and Radiant. So, you know, I'm not going to call one project bad or good. What I'm going to say is that from my perspective, the influence of ASICs over a network is unpredictable at best. And that means that purchasing this type of equipment is extremely risky. And the problem is that it is the most lucrative for people that are selling you the equipment, and of course the affiliates that are tied to these particular companies. Meaning that the reason you see a lot of influencers selling and pushing ASICs is because they get a kickback through affiliate marketing. Like myself, you can go to use my affiliate link down below if you want to go to Coastal Crypto and purchase some ASICs. I appreciate it if you do, but at the same time, I'm not going to push that, because what you need to understand is that influence there is profit driven, and it doesn't mean that they're necessarily looking out for your best interest. We're seeing miners release at such high prices that their ROI is looking good on launch, but once you get them is dragged out for a very long time. And depending on the timing of when you purchase, you can be in some very bad positions. Even with a successful ASIC launch like we saw with Caspa, depending on the timing of when you purchased your ASIC and which ASIC you purchased, I have talked to plenty of people that are tens of thousands of dollars in the hole from purchasing a Caspa ASIC to mine from their home with. At the same time, you could take a look at something like Greater Good Mining, who was very early with, of course, purchasing those ASICs and following that cycle and upgrading those ASICs, who became very successful with it. So it can fluctuate greatly, right? You could come out on top by tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how much equipment you're purchasing and so on. Or you could find yourself at the very bottom, being in the hole, and that is why I think it's very important to be aware of these risks. I address all of that because we're about to talk about a miner that looks like it's going to make a shit ton of money, and that is the Antminer AL1 for Alephium. Now, this particular miner has been announced by Bitmain, and there will be a spot sale. Now, before coupons, you're going to be looking at $41,800, which is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Because we know the BOM cost for building these ASICs is not $41,800. It's probably a lot closer to like $5,000 after research and development and all of that sort of thing. And they already have the fabricators in place. We know they test their units, so they have some of the volume of these particular cryptocurrencies. I think Bitmain's getting a lot better at their strategy with, I don't want to say manipulating the market, but influencing the market to go in the direction it wants at the time it wants it to, and then bringing that back down once they've shipped out a bunch of their miners. This has been something that we even saw with Caspa, and we've seen with a lot of other projects, Kadena being the most notable as the biggest failure of last cycle. And I think it's really interesting that we are like, obviously the more money it looks like it's going to make, the more feasible these look, right? You say 41,800. And right now, I think this miner on calculators is showing nearly $1,000 a day. Okay, cool. I pay it off in 41 days. But how many miners are they going to ship compared to how many are already on the network, and how many are going to come online is all questions that is really up in the air. Now, on top of that, you can say, well, you get the coupons at the $29,260, but keep in mind with Bitmain, you are going to have tariff costs, you are going to have shipping costs, those sorts of things. So make sure you pay attention to that and add that all into your estimations for your ROI. Now, this one is 15.6 terahash a second. There is a pro model that has been announced as well now. This one also is at 3,510 watts. If we take a look at their main page here and scroll down, you'll see that there is a Pro. I'm not actually sure if that is going to be a firmware thing or a separate launch. I am not actually sure. Let me know in the comment section if you already know. That one will take you up to 16.6 terahash a second at 3,730 watts. If they took a look at a mining calculator at even 12 cents a day per kilowatt hour, you're looking at $977 in profit. You're looking at essentially, I think in revenue, $997, almost $1,000 in revenue on this particular unit if you got it on the network right now, which is frankly insane. Now the question will be is, we know it'll come down. How much will it come down? Is it worth, you know, investing in a shitcoin ASICs at $60,000 after fees and everything like that? Let's be fair and say maybe $40,000 with coupons and everything, and depending on how many you buy, who your supplier is, all that. And basically, I think if you believe in a lithium and that's like your go-to thing, it makes sense from that perspective. You guys know me. I don't think that you should tie yourself to an individual cryptocurrency. I think that's the dumbest play you can make in this particular realm. And seeing as ASICs does that to you, it carries a lot of risk. It looks really good though. And if you had one right now, you would be on top of the world, right? It's pretty insane. And I think some people are saying in chat that from Crypto Miner Bro, you can get it for $32,000. I've never worked with Crypto Miner Bro. I know that I believe they have RPM codes, coupon codes. I think they have Rabid coupon codes. So my assumption is they ship. So probably good. The only ones I've had experience with that ship and get me my products so far has been BT Miners and Coastal Crypto personally, or direct from like Gold Shell or something like that, or direct from Bitmain. Now, coming off the tail end of that, we saw IceRiver come out with a miner as well. And this one is the AL0. Now, this one's going to be essentially just like the Caspa KS0. And it is going to be a $799 unit. And I'm not so sure that this one makes any sense at all with the threat of the Bitmain ASICs coming online. This seems mistimed. While the KS0s were coming out basically along the lines of when IceRiver was launching their big boy ASICs for Caspa, this one's coming out after, or being announced after, we're seeing the big boy ASICs come from Bitmain, where the Caspa version, the KS0, came out before Bitmain had gotten on the Caspa train. And so this one is going to be a little bit more, I think, risky than say the KS0. I'd like to hear your thoughts, opinions on it. $799, you got 400 gigahash a second at 100 watts at 12 cents a kilowatt hour. That still looks good, right? You're looking at $25 a day in revenue and profits because of the low power. And that could be something that you want to take a look at if you're just wanting to help support the network from a decentralized perspective. My assumption is these would come down in price. You also have to take into account that these units don't have fans. We've heard a lot of issues with the KS0s failing, especially if you try to overclock them, that sort of thing. Play it safe as far as overclocking goes and new firmware, all of that. Make sure that you're making sure that those things are going to work and not brick your units. Just a friendly word of advice as far as that goes. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, from my perspective, if I was going to buy one, I would buy, you know, the Bitmain big boy, and I just say, okay, if I'm going to support ALF, I'm going to go that route. There is the argument, though, I mean, from my perspective, where you kind of diversify and maybe you get some of all of these little mini miners and plug them all in. The problem with that is you're then playing with a lot of fire from a tax perspective, from a revenue perspective, and all of that. And it can overcomplicate your mining operation if you're not sticking to a single project at a time. I mean, even in the GPU space, I stick to a single speculative mine. I mine that out. I get that bag. I drop it on the exchange day one. I sell it, and then I move on to the next speculative mine. And at least from that perspective, my farm is always on kind of a single thing, right? Unless, of course, I'm like dual mining or something like that in the winter, or triple mining, that sort of thing. So I think it can get a little tricky if you are, you know, diversifying in the multiple ASIC mining realm. But, you know, it is what it is. Lithium has some other things that I think are going to complicate matters with the multiple chains. Some of the mining pools sticking to single chains, which is causing some hash rate distribution optic issues, I should say. And I think that they need to work with mining pools a little bit better to, I guess, mine across those chains or display that. Figure out a way to pull, maybe, I don't know, figure out a way to pull all of that data a little bit better. I think that was being worked on, but that was the last big gripe that I had with the lithium. Other than that, you know, obviously it has been mooning. So if you spec mined it back when we talked about it, I don't know, 2022, end of 22, beginning of 23, then congratulations. I hope you're doing good. The next thing that we're going to talk about is me drinking some water because my throat is scratchy. All right, so let's talk about the RTX 5090. We are obviously seeing a huge increase in power over the past few years on GPUs. This release is looking to be no different, with power supply makers preparing their wattage calculator for next-gen GPUs. And we're seeing a 50-watt increase over the 4090 for the RTX 5090, taking it up to a total, or a TDP of 500 watts from the 450 watts, still over a single 16-pin power connector. Those have been extremely sketchy as of late too, even with the redesign. So, you know, more power, still sketchy connector. You know, it is what it is. It's like, then now we got voltage gate on Intel CPUs. It's like these PC manufacturers are trying to burn our houses down. Sometimes it feels like that, but we're seeing a 30-watt increase on the 5080 to 350 watts. We're seeing a 20-watt increase on the 5070, a 55-watt increase on the 5060. And basically, I mean, this is really interesting because I think from the perspective of least amount of power increase, it's going to be on the 5080. The biggest power increase percentage-wise is going to be on the RTX 5060. And I'm wondering how that's going to interpret into performance, and if those numbers are primarily due to essentially the memory consumption, which is what it could be looking at these numbers, or on the clock of the core. I'm going to guess that this is coming from the upgrade to the GDDR7, primarily due to the fact that we are seeing it, especially on like the low-end 5060 at this point, but we're going to have to get more specifications as far as that's concerned, and I don't think that's going to come anytime soon because the RTX 50 announcement has been slipping to 2025 per a rumor from some journalists that visited Computex. So basically, journalists who attended the Popular Technology Expo shared their insights from conversations with multiple board partners. However, unless they spoke with executives, this information is rarely accurate enough to provide a definite answer. Marketing personnel are usually less informed than engineering teams who share details once development stages are completed. Nevertheless, by combining information from various sources, it has been determined that the AMD Radeon RX 8000 series powered by RDNA 4 architecture and the Intel Arc B series powered by Battlemage XE2 HPG, which is one I'm interested in, are definitely not coming this year. Furthermore, it's clear that NVIDIA is not rushing to launch the 50 series, although the timing of the announcement remains uncertain. Some rumors suggest that NVIDIA might announce the RTX 50 series by the end of this year, with the actual launch potentially happening in 2025. This would be consistent with NVIDIA's strategy of separating announcements from product release through multiple embargoes, including original details on specifications, pricing disclosures, and unboxings. According to Copite, who, in my experience over the past 12 years of following hardware, has been pretty accurate, NVIDIA is not expected to unveil the new Blackwell gaming GPUs before CES, January 7th to 10th of 2025. I would assume that means that we see maybe some summer releases for the top-end models, and then, of course, winter releases for the lower-end models. That would be my assumption. So don't plan on upgrading to the 50 series this year. That means me purchasing the 40 series, I think, at the beginning or the end of last year. Ended up still being, I think, a best bet because I am getting some of the best performance for a lot of speculative mines right now. So I've been pretty happy with that purchase. We'll just have to see how much more of an improvement we are getting, and it's not looking so good compared to leaks, apparently. This is coming from Red Gaming Tech on YouTube, and he is not quite like Copite in the rumor realm. I will have to say he has been less accurate than Copite on Twitter, at least in my experience over the past 12 years. He is also fairly new to the scene, so we'll have to see if this is true, but we are getting performance targets, and here they are. The 4090 to the Titan AI will be a 63% increase, which obviously that's going to be an extremely expensive card. Not something we're really looking at from the gaming and mining perspective, whereas the RTX 4090 to 5090 will only be about a 48% increase. Here's where it gets a little disappointing. The 4080 Super, which is not the regular 4080, compared to a 5080, is going to only be a 29% increase, and the 4070 Super will be a 26% increase. Typically, you're trying to look, I think, generation over generation at a 30% to 40% increase at the very least, and seeing these lower end models getting less than 30%, at least from my perspective, is not enticing from a gaming perspective, but it could play out good on the mining, from the memory intensive mining perspective, as we will be getting that 448-bit memory bus. At least hopefully that's what we're told on the 40 series or the 90 series top end model on the 5090. That's really what I would be looking at personally, is what we're going to be seeing there. Hopefully we'll see that at the end of the day, some really good memory intensive performance, and we'll just have to wait and see. It's just not looking as good, I think, as we used to see back in the day, right? Like even the 20, I guess everything's feeling like 10 series to 20 series improvements, of course, albeit at least with the 20 series, we saw the onset of course, all of the, I want to say global illumination, but ray tracing, right? The new version of global illumination. So I think you get a little bit more of an excuse from 10 series to 20 series than you do from like a 40 series to 50 series. Now we have new miner releases. We have the BZ miner version 21.4.0, and there are some good news here. There is some good news here on the Warthog side of things, and that is going to be upgrading for support to Varus 2.2, because obviously Warthog released their updates to the mining algorithm to include Varus 2.2, so you will get that support right now from BZ Miner if you're looking for support. And on Nexa, they fixed some rare connection bugs. The direction that BZ Miner has been taking is extremely interesting, in my humble opinion. He's been working a lot on, I think, a lot of projects that people are ignoring, spending a ton of time with the Dynex optimizations, being basically first in class for Dynex and doing some very original work there on balancing proof of work and proof of useful work at the miner level, which I think is amazing. And then on top of that, it's actually pretty cool that he did mention thanks to Son of a Tech for the BC250, and he basically linked to my channel over there. So huge shout out to IEDoc over at BZ Miner for actually mentioning that. I just noticed it. That's pretty cool. The other things he's been doing, obviously developing for Warthog on the side, which has been a project that I've been really interested in. So I like seeing miner support for these, basically these projects that aren't getting as much visibility as some of these higher profit projects, right? I think the technology aspects are good from the perspective of like both Dynex and Warthog, but the luster has been kind of low, right? There's just not a lot of excitement surrounding these projects right now, and we'll have to see where it goes in the future, but everybody still needs miners for these projects. So I'm glad that BZ Miner is taking that route. On the other side of things, with the new release of SRB Miner, you guessed it, support for Zealous Hash v2. And that is pretty much it. This was released 2 weeks ago, obviously with the launch of the hard fork for Zealous Hash. And this repeats down the line with Rigel Miner, and so on and so forth. I think these are the only ones right now that I'm aware of that added support for Zealous Hash v2. I think there might be a couple more, but in my list, this is all I pulled up right now. So these are two miners you can use to mine Zealous, and obviously, like I stated in the beginning, I think we pumped them up plenty. Now we get into a little bit of an awkward situation, and I want to preface this with a few things. I'm going to approach this as fairly as possible from all parties' perspectives, okay? The post that I'm going to show, I think, is a little harsh on Meterbox. However, I think that Meterbox could have handled it better as well. So basically, after the Meterbox tour with Red Panda Mining, Vinny had made a post over on sonofatech.locals.com talking about some of the issues with their return policy, as well as basically having some more comments thrown at me, as well as emails in the past that I've had surrounding some of the customer service that Meterbox has been given to essentially the end users. And this can be a little bit tricky of a situation because you want to give everybody the chance to do better. At the same time, you also want to take into account maybe things that I think the end users or the customers didn't actually consider before making their purchases, which is what happened in this case. And I think overall there's lessons for everybody to learn. I think the two lessons that I would think you should learn from this particular situation is, one, make sure you're aware of what you're buying before you purchase it. especially if you're buying it from a small company. And two, if you're a small company, you should probably go out of your way to take care of individuals, even if they haven't understood your product as you laid it out. That could also be on your side from a messaging perspective. Maybe you could make things clearer. So basically, Vinny came out and shared all of these screenshots discussing essentially a Meterbox purchase that he made. Basically, he paid $50 for a receptacle box. He was under the impression he was getting more components. He opened the box and realized it was an empty box and reached out through Shopify to return it. And basically, he was told that he needed to buy other parts, and he responded that he had no interest in buying further parts and wanted to return it. He was told that his 7-day return period had expired. He just ordered the box, opened it within hours, and reached back out to return. So the 7-day return policy started when it was ordered. And this comes into, obviously brings up a big issue, because if you order something that only has a 7-day return policy and you're not going to get it delivered to your house until post 7 days, you need to be aware that this could happen to you. Now, I think a 7-day return policy is extremely short. I just had somebody on Locals the other day say that they wanted to cancel their subscription to Locals 8 months ago. I refunded them for the entire full 8 months. Now, I can't always do that, and I understand that we have policies in place to stop that in case, the business bank account is in a position where it can't do that and it's unreasonable. But I think from a customer service perspective, 7 days is ridiculously short. I think 30 days is probably standard for a small company. And it shouldn't be, if it is going to be 7 days, in my humble opinion, it should probably be 7 days from the date delivered, or at least something like 48 hours. You should at least give, at least 24 hours from the time it was delivered. I mean, something along those lines. So I get the frustration here. Now, from the perspective of Meterbox here, Vinny did not read the description of the product fully or understand the 7-day return policy initially. And so there is better work as a consumer that you can do to make sure that you're not falling into these traps. And frankly, these can be consumer traps that are intentionally set as well. And so you need to pay attention to that, because not saying that this is a malicious situation in particular, but it can be, I think, in some cases, right? So I wanted to bring this up. Basically, at the end of the day, he was offered a 50% refund. However, that 50% refund was never received or not received as of to date. Hopefully a little bit of visibility on this issue will get Vinny the 50% refund that he was promised, and everybody can be aware that if you're going to be ordering from Meterbox, there is a 7-day return policy that starts at the day of ordering. So if you're going to order from Meterbox and you want to have the option to return it, make sure that you are getting it shipped to you within ample amount of time to actually make that return. Otherwise, I wouldn't order from Meterbox at this point. Personally, I've found with Meterbox in particular, this has happened more than once, unfortunately. And there have been some product quality assurance issues as well. So make sure that you fully understand yourself as well, how to assemble these things too. Because once again, this isn't necessarily Meterbox's problem. It could be assembly problem. So more clear instructions on assembly could be helpful, and basically some more quality assurance on the product design could be helpful potentially. I'm not sure. I think communication to the end user definitely needs to get better. So there you go. Not a fun topic, but we got to talk about it. Apologies, fellas. I'm still coughing it up a little bit here. So I'm going to try to work through this, but the Radiant market has announced its mainnet launch. We have deployed a token, also known as a glyph, on RxD20. You can watch the how-to on how to mint it on this very YouTube channel on the main page, as well as go to goatglyph.com and take a look at how to mint it on that page. I'm pretty excited about this one, not because it's on Radiant necessarily. I think that Radiant has a ton of issues with its hash rate and the mysterious entity of ASIC miners on there. So I'm a little bit worried about the project from that perspective. But what Radiant has done that's extremely interesting is release a token platform that allows you to very easily, as an individual, launch a token that is mintable through GPUs, akin to basically TON, which then had Gram, of course. And I thought those ideas were really interesting. And then now anyone can kind of do it. And it's very simple to do. And I'll be doing a tutorial for you guys later on. It doesn't have to be mintable via GPUs, but as a GPU miner, I encourage you to make everything mintable via GPUs because that does give it some sort of base level value for the power used to mint the tokens. Now, the other thing that's really interesting about this project is that when you mint tokens, you can essentially burn these tokens and it will turn them into photons, which also has a base level value, giving your project off the bat some sort of base level value without investing anything into liquidity pools on your own. For example, of course, other projects that would do that side of things would be something like Coin, where you kind of have to put in a little bit of money to start a project. So I think it's really cool. Now, for GOAT, people have been asking when it's going to get listed, and that should happen when the Radiant Marketplace launches on the 27th of July, barring any sort of like massive crash to the blockchain or to the token system in and of itself. You never know what's going to happen with these types of things, especially when they get a lot of traction and a lot of activity on the network. That being said, we have seen since the launch of the RxD20 system, a huge increase in the total amount of, I want to see, I didn't put that here because we're going to talk about the bad side, I guess. I don't have it here, unfortunately. That we saw, I want to say like 1000x or something silly in the amount of transactions on the Radiant blockchain. And so there has been a huge increase in interest of this particular token system, I think for good reason. But, you know, not everything is positive news with Radiant, because we would be amiss if we didn't talk about this crazy post. I'm sure all of y'all have seen this, especially if you follow me on Twitter. But the Radiant community Twitter posted an announcement. I believe this was last week, July 3rd, a couple weeks ago, saying, "Dear Radiant community, we are excited to share some significant updates regarding the Radiant network. A major ASIC manufacturer, commonly referred to as the Entity, has made a substantial investment in our network. Here are the key points we would like to communicate." So they communicate that they have a commitment to network security. I'm going to push back. I'm sorry. I got to push back, because if you have a commitment to network security and you have a single entity that takes over 50% of the hash rate, you have a fucking problem, and you are not committed to network security, because you should be forking to something to stop that. Sorry, that's my opinion. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback on that, and everybody loves ASICs now because everybody's getting paid by big ASIC manufacturers to love ASICs, but it's not good. Like, you are at significant risk of security to a single entity now. That's just facts. That entity controls your network at this point. Hopefully they're a good actor. which so far they have been, but that's not guaranteed. And if you are a decentralized platform and you are focused on security, you should fork away from that algorithm if it's compromised by a single miner. Now, they go on to say community collaboration. In response to our request, the entity has agreed not to run their own private nodes and to distribute their hashing power across multiple pools. This measure ensures redundancy and a more decentralized network given the circumstances. Now, my communication with, of course, the development team over there at Radiant, because I had tweeted, it's pretty crazy that the developers know who the entity is and won't reveal it, have put their network at risk. And then the pushback was they don't know who the entity is. So I guess my question there, and we'll be having an interview here coming up with a developer over there, a community manager at the very least, and we'll get some more questions here. My big question is, if you don't know who they are, what's the communication mechanism being utilized to communicate these deals, right? Like you're submitting a request to them and they are adhering to your request. There's communication lines open, so you at least know who the anonymous individual is, whether that's a Discord username or whatever that may be. But okay, so you don't know who they are, but you're in communication with them. So that's kind of interesting. And it gets sketchier from that perspective. And this is why. There is support for the community fund coming directly from this entity. So demonstrating their dedication to our project, the entity is contributing 10% of their block reward from Viper to the community fund. Now, I have a big problem with this because you're going to tell me that you don't know who this is. You have communication lines open. You're focused on security, but then you're captured by profits. I mean, that's what this reads as. Now, maybe it's completely disconnected and it isn't how they meant to communicate this, but it is pretty clear to me that it seems like this is how it's communicated. Like, I think from the perspective of any individual that's going to read this, you're going to read this and say, oh, they're in talks with basically someone that controls all the hash rate, meaning it's not decentralized at all. And then they're letting them maintain that and not switching algorithms because they're getting up to, I think, total with like 10% or 5% of the daily emissions to a community fund. Now, I'd like to say community funds are always used for good purposes. And I think, like, I'm going to say something that's probably going to rub a few people the wrong way, but we saw over $250,000 from the community fund for Varus coin spent on multiple events at Consensus, which paid for food and alcohol for all of the community members and people that would join. I appreciate that I was able to go eat for free and drink some drinks for free at these events, but it begs the question, you know, how did those votes go through? Who's in control of these community funds? And are they being utilized for pleasure of developers and community members? And if so, how is that beneficial? And can you prove that it's fucking beneficial to the people that are invested in your project? So I think the question that everybody wants to know, because we need to see this entity distribute these products, because at the very least that will decentralize the network. If 10% of the block rewards are going to the community fund, and that's 5% of the daily emissions, that means that we are clearly within 51% threat from a single entity. I mean, the numbers are right there. You can calculate that out. Go run that in a calculator, and you'll figure out that that is what the threat is. So it goes on to say that the entity plans to release their miners publicly once the economics of it have reached their intended goal. I'm having a hard time even reading that to you guys. They will keep their network secure and support our project in the interim, while eventually making their machines available to the broader community for more decentralization of the hash and distribution. We understand that some community members have had concerns about network security and coin distribution fairness. We want to reiterate that proof of work remains the fairest method of distributing coins, not if only one person's getting all the coins. I mean, this is why pre-mines are looked down upon, right? Like, so once the entity has made enough money, they'll start selling you the shovels. And I'd like to say that this is a single case within cryptocurrency and ASICs. But this has been the case with ASICs and small cryptocurrencies for quite some time. FPGAs obviously have this issue as well. And unfortunately, most of the altcoin smaller cap ASIC mineable coins are controlled economically by a single entity, right? And that does include, you know, Caspa to a certain extent. That does include Alephium to a certain extent. It looks really bad here, but I think to the credit of Radiant, what they've done is they've just told you what's going on. I think from the perspective of other developers and other cryptocurrency communities that are doing the same thing, they're just lying to you. And if you push back against them, they try to gaslight you, call you stupid, and get more likes because people are more concerned about their bag going up than actual any sort of ethics or morality surrounding the fucking subject. And that includes the developers of Caspa and Alephium as well, in my humble opinion. Let's talk about the mining conference. I will be attending the mining conference September 27th through 29th in Minnesota, and there will be a lot of other speakers there. We will have Brian Snyder from Kaboom Racks. We'll have Austin Howie from Aerotech Innovations. Dan Blaine from insurance broker at, or who is an insurance broker at Marsh McClellan. We have Ellie Pembroke, who is a proprietor at Pembroke Creative, and Eric Martin, who is the owner of Martin Mining. I think John is going from Coastal Crypto, so it'll be great to see him out there. I got to bring out the shirts that he sent me for Consensus. I appreciate them for sending those over. And then, of course, if we scroll down, there's plenty of other great guys here, but we got to get to the best over here. Matthew Hopkins, otherwise known as Son of a Tech. And I'll be talking about speculative mining and remaining profitable with GPUs, even during a bear market, which has been something I've been proud of being able to do over the past couple of years. So hopefully I'll give you guys some good tips and tricks while I'm out there, plus hanging out with everyone. I hope to see you guys out there. Links down in the description below if you want to purchase tickets and figure out travel schedule and all of that. Goat Glyph is launched on the Radiant network. Like I said, I am pretty excited that we have a mintable token with GPUs, which I think is very unique for Radiant. So as much as I just kind of had my little rant surrounding them, there is, of course, positive news from the development on their token side of things. Go check it out at goatglyph.com. I think finally we have to talk about the disappointing launch of KRC20 beta, Cplex beta. As you can see here on the mainnet, there are no tokens listed currently, and that is because it has been shut down. In a post over on Twitter, Cplex said the launch of Cplex open beta has been met with incredible enthusiasm, far exceeding our expectations. We're thrilled to see Caspa currency community so engaged. Now, I still have some questions surrounding this because it is stated that the Caspa mainnet has remained stable and robust, and they identified some issues with RPC wallets, central, I shouldn't say sex on YouTube, huh? Centralized exchanges for integrations there, and other services such as load balancing and failure to construct transactions according to KIP9. We are currently working together with the community to help those parties resolve the issues. Additionally, for later integrated parties, please be aware of KIP9 to ensure functions work properly. Now, to address these challenges, allow enough time for third parties to upgrade, return peace to the mainnet, and ensure a smooth experience for everyone. We have decided to temporarily pause the open beta after the DAA score reaches 83,525,600, and we'll keep you posted into the exact timing. I think the relaunch is coming soon, but I'm still kind of waiting for confirmation on that. I was trying to find it today. If you guys know, let me know in the comment section and the live stream. Don't worry about your data. It will not be lost. I have questions surrounding this. I think myself, along with a lot of other people, when we were trying to mint, we were burning Caspa and not getting the tokens in our wallet. I think the question I have along with everybody else is, when this comes back online, are all the tokens that we attempted to mint going to show up if Caspa was burned? Or will it not? Is that Caspa gone forever? And I think, I'm hoping for the latter or former there and not the latter, but it's not too clear to me if so what was happening is, like I said, no tokens were showing up. The way this reads is if the tokens were in there for that data, they'll be there when it comes back online. I'm not sure what happens to everything that got left in limbo, which is really kind of where I'm not sure, but I guess we'll find out on the relaunch, and I'll let you guys know if I end up with a bunch of the Nacho token, which I was trying to mint, in my wallet. So we'll see once that happens, and then I'll let you guys know. But hopefully I will. Hopefully I'll have a bunch of Nacho sitting there ready to add to my cheese. There you go. Something like that. Anyways, some of the things I would push back here on is the Caspa mainnet remaining stable and robust. I wouldn't say it's not stable. I think like a lot of the advertisement for Caspa was that fees would remain low with high activity. And if anything, what we saw with this in particular were fees going through the roof, just like every other blockchain. Obviously, it's like hard to dog on a chain for something that happens across all chains, but because it was something that was supposed to be essentially addressed with Caspa in particular, that doesn't appear to be the case, at least early on from my perspective. I think if we see a high load, there are going to be higher fees. That is going to drive the fees up, just like we've seen with every other blockchain in the past. This is kind of needed, though, on the flip side for miners in general, because we have the fast emissions with Caspa. And because of those fast emissions, miners are going to be running out of Caspa to mine, and they'll need fees to basically stay profitable. So it's kind of a catch-22. You want that low fee advertisement for the end user, but you also need higher fees for the miners to remain profitable so that they still provide security to the network. There are much smarter guys working on this than myself, so I'm hoping that they figure it out, and then I'll just tell you guys if it worked out or if it didn't at the end of the day. But that pretty much wraps up the show for today. I want to thank everybody for stopping by the Crypto Mining Show. We will be doing this every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then eventually I'll be following it up, of course, with Q&A over on sonofatech.locals.com. I will address you guys with some Q&A right now on the YouTube channel, but in the future, I just want to make sure you guys are aware that will be done on locals only. So real quick, I'm going to pull up the chat. Please tag at sonofatech, which will help me read the message easier. And if you want your message read right away, you can add a super chat, which just makes it very, very bold on the chat screen and easy for me to read, so your question won't be missed. I know I've been gone for some time, so maybe you guys have some things to ask me about. Gandalf says, at Son of a Tech in relation to Radiant, so once the entity has made enough money, they are going to price gouge the F out of us. I mean, how much more are you decentralizing anything with the price of the damn shitcoin miners? I understand the frustration. I think this is the frustration that when the post was made, at the very least, if it was supposed to sound different, it didn't sound different. And I think that your sentiment surrounding it is what a lot of people feel surrounding what's going on with the entity. Crackling said it seems like it's 10% from a single pool. Yeah, the thing is, if you read the post, let's go back to that. And this is how you can do the math. This is how we know the entity has over 50% as well. So the entity is contributing 10% of their block rewards from Viper Pool, actually near 100%. I just thought about this. So the entity has split their hash power 50% on Hum Pool and 50% on Viper Pool. 10% of the block rewards from Viper are going to the community fund, which equals 5% of the daily emissions, which actually, if you add all that up, means the entity has 100% of the hash rate. It's actually worse than I stated earlier. God. Oh, God. Aetherite says, any news on Zealous mining with AMD GPUs? None that I'm aware of. I think doesn't it technically work on SRB miner, or did they take that away with Verisat? Oh, they did take that away. Yeah, so no, not on AMD GPUs I'm aware of. Klett says, at Somatech, are you currently CPU mining? No. I mean, yes, but no. I mean, I already stopped. I was doing a speculative mine, and then it just swapped to GPUs, so not anymore. Mine Something says, good stream. Thank you, good sir. Solar Miner in Spain says, any suggestion on what to mine with the 7600 XT? Don't mine Mint Goat. And I'm actually serious about that. The 7000 series mints Radiant tokens very well. So there is that. I haven't done a ton of testing with that particular GPU yet. You can see it back here. I will be. So stay tuned to the channel for that. I'm going to get back to testing as much as I can. And Turtle Tech says, just hoping your health is getting better. Thank you for the stream. Yeah, man, I'm on a lot of... I'm getting a lot of infusion. I get infusions every month. And they help for about 3 weeks. The last week's kind of bad. And then get the infusion again. It helps for about another 3 weeks. So that's kind of where I'm at as far as that goes. But essentially, for anybody that's wondering, I have something called ankylosing spondylitis, which is what the guitar player from Motley Crue had. But that essentially means, my best way to explain it is, my body thinks all of my joints are actually broken bones. So it starts growing bone spurs to try to repair the bones. And that mainly affects the spine. My vertebrae are fusing, which is extremely painful. The cartilage between my ribs is fusing. So it's hard to get a deep breath. I think that's also why I'm having like throat issues today. I'm going to have to definitely figure out how I'm going to pace myself. You guys are probably going to recognize me or watch me slow down my speech, I think. But that's just like the expansion doesn't happen because my ribs are growing together, as well as my spine. The infusions that I'm getting are TNF inhibitors, which slows that process down. There's not a cure, and you kind of have to bounce between TNF inhibitors as they stop working. And then obviously you have to have all the surgeries to get rid of the bone spurs, fix the spine, intentionally fuse some stuff like the SI joint, which I'm having done. It's a lot. It's just a lot. So, but I'm getting through it. Ted says the miner on Viper, all of his 195 rigs are running from 450 to 550 gigahash on the 24-hour lines, up with 0 models coming from IceRiver, who they keep saying it is not. It just smells. Well, we won't know who it is until we know who it is, right? Solar Miner in Spain says there is not much videos for info on the 7600 XT. That is why I got all of these. You can see them right back here in the video, but I got all of them so I could test them because I know there's no testing being done on them. Gandalf says, Tech, I find it hard to justify burning my house down to mine with these new GPUs. What is your comfort level with the new connectors? Is the risk still super high? Well, a majority of them, like third-party models, are not coming with the new connectors. So it depends on which models you get. I would lean towards order them with the PCIe 8 connectors. Did I say that right? Anyways, get the old 8-pin connectors, right? The old PCIe 8-pin connector models if you can. That is getting phased out more and more. Hopefully the revisions come along with that on the 16-pin and those get better. We'll just have to see. I know they've gotten a lot better than they were, but there are still reports of a lot of those issues. So, Mind Something says, outside of tech, are you going to get the Ryzen 9950X to test on launch? That is my intention, Mind Something. It depends on if... This is going to sound crazy, but it really honestly depends on if BlockFi actually sends me the settlement that they're supposed to send me. They keep dancing around a lot. So that money would go obviously to next Tuesday. And so that BlockFi money would then get moved into buying equipment for the YouTube channel to review. It was supposed to go through today. They didn't like that I didn't include my middle name on the W-9, but the middle name is included on my bank, or maybe it was reverse. Either way, I had to change that, and then they make you do a 48-hour waiting period for the wire transfer. It's a bunch of crap, but that's pretty much it. I might not get it day one. It looks like I will. I think it should go through by Friday. And then, yeah, money will be set aside to get a motherboard for the test bench and the 9950X for testing. No, that's pretty much it. Or if enough people sign up on locals, you know what I mean? It just depends. But pretty much everything from locals goes into purchasing everything to review. That's how I do it, right? The YouTube mining business is back to purely only going back into building itself up and then living off of the living off the day job, right? Oh, I'll probably get some of the new Intels. Thanks everybody for watching. Be sure to hit the like, comment, subscribe, and notification bells down below. And I'll see you, honestly, I will see you next Tuesday.